One thing before we continue, let's talk about the creature too. So she described, for example, that when she got closer, the creatures had some kind of claw and that their hands were big, big fingers, big hands. And she said it looked like a square refrigerator, kind of a weird thing, kind of square. She said the mouth was something, it looked like it was covered. You could only see the outline of the mouth, like that little slit people report. It had big eyes, like I said, really round eyes. The head was kind of square, kind of weird, kind of pointy. And it was like this. It started out square, then it tapered off. It must be like a drop, kind of a weird thing. And he said it had something that looked like an ear, kind of long, kind of weird. And it is. He also said that this creature, this thing, whatever it was, it made a hissing sound, right? There was a little noise. There was a sound. She said it was like when a radio isn't tuned to a station, that static noise, something different. She even said, you know, when you turn on the radio and it's between stations and there's that hissing. So it was something like that, right? That's what she saw. And before she left, right, she emphasized, right? Wow, it's cold, right? This thing here is so cold, right? Yeah. And she seemed like she was releasing some kind of cold mist, right? She can't really explain it very well. She says it was kind of cold in that place. Yeah, other people, right? People who were close to this creature, especially there at Unicamp, also mentioned that cold sensation, right? So it matches a lot with what this witness, that cook at the police station, was saying. And at first, when Birajara interviewed her, she was with her son, right? The oldest son. And then I don't know if it was because she was nervous, but Birajara asked her if she smelled anything strange inside the cell, right? And she said no. But her son, who was with her, ended up saying, no, remember you said there was a bad smell, right? That was filling the place, that room, right? Then, after her oldest son reminded her, she corrected what she told Birajara. She said, no, there really was a smell, right? She said it was a really bad smell, right? There in that room, right? But she never actually said that. At no point did she say, like, it's an animal smell, right? Like a monkey or something. She didn't say that. She did mention that it smelled kind of like burnt rubber, something like that, right? Like a burnt tire, right? So it was kind of a sharp smell, you know? I don't know if you've ever smelled burning rubber, it has that sharpness to it. Many people who were close to the Varginha creature talked about a smell like ammonia, right? Something that burned your nose, right? Sometimes it even made your eyes water, you know? That's how bad the smell was. There, one detail. For her to talk and tell these things to Birajara in 1999, actually, the one who encouraged her was the shopkeeper who found out, right? Because at first she only told her children, her family, and ended up telling the shopkeeper who was close to the family and everything. And then it was the shopkeeper who got this story to Birajara, and Birajara then went there and collected her account, right? So let's continue here. So after she smelled it, saw the creature and everything, they decided to leave and they didn't talk about it for quite a few days. So a few days went by. She doesn't know. She says maybe it was 2 days, 3 days, one day, right? But maybe it was 2 days that went by. And then the following happened. She was working there, and then a woman with blonde hair showed up, right? They even called her a big blonde, right? And this woman spoke with a heavy accent. There was another guy too with kind of blonde, reddish hair, right? White, both of them very fair skinned. He would speak, and the other person who was with him, there was someone else, would translate, right? Because he spoke with a heavy accent. She doesn't know, right? She doesn't know English. She's just an ordinary person too, but they were probably the Americans who were already there. And then after those days passed, besides that man and the fair skinned woman with blonde hair, some other people also arrived, like I said. Some people stayed there on the external stairs, that cement staircase that Arthur showed, which goes to the front yard, to the upper floor of the building. And the others from the committee, people who went there, stayed next to an armored truck. An armored truck. She said she doesn't remember like any logo, design, insignia, symbol, anything. She doesn't remember anything that could identify that armored truck. She said the man was tall, really fair skinned, right? He was very light with reddish blonde hair and very thin. He was wearing a gray suit, a light blue shirt, and a tie. And the woman, this tall blonde, she said she looks about 30 years old approximately. And she was speaking in a strange way with this man, right? And she couldn't understand anything they were saying. Then at a certain moment, what happened? Another detective, not the same one who had taken her upstairs, he whispered to her, he said, "Look, they're about to take the creature." He said that, "Look, they're about to take the creature." And then they ended up taking that thing while she was busy with her chores. She went to the back to get something. She doesn't remember if it was a broom or something else. So she didn't even see the creature being taken into the armored car, right? And then after that, the armored car left and everything, right? And that was the story, right? Now she says she doesn't know if João Pedro, that police chief, saw it. I believe he did, right? I have information that he did see it, right? But the cook, she doesn't know. But since he was the police chief himself, he must have seen it. If most of the detectives there also saw it, right? I mentioned two different detectives besides the cook, and the police chief definitely saw it, right? Thank you. Another thing she remembers perfectly, right? This witness, that around those days, the police chief for the district had been transferred, and that may have temporarily put Dr. João Pedro in that position, right? So the police chief was transferred, and then they took João Pedro, who was from the traffic department, and put him there. That was pretty common back then, right? And she also remembers that later, after João Pedro was transferred to Boa Esperança, he came back soon after. And that's kind of curious, right? Because it's really hard for a police chief to return to the same district like that. I don't know what happened there, but it's because they trusted him and everything. Maybe the way he carried himself, his attitude when it came to guaranteeing confidentiality at the time, right? So he was a trustworthy guy. Let's see what else I could say about this case. Well, basically, that's it, right? The creature then went through this police station. It was upstairs. We found out that there was a creature that was kept locked up in a kind of storage room inside the ESA. We don't know if it's the same creature, right? Because when it arrived at the ESA, it was alive. Then for some reason, they killed it there. But this creature that was at the police station, apparently it wasn't aggressive. In fact, they opened it up to take a look and all, right? And it stayed there for a few days until that team came to pick it up, right? We don't know. Everything indicates they were Americans because they spoke in a way that was hard to understand, right? According to the testimony of the cook who worked at the police station for more than 20 years, but we don't know, right? We know that the Americans were involved in everything that happened there, but since there were several creatures, many of them ended up in different places, right? Besides hospitals, police stations, or going straight to ESA, right? The dead ones, there was one that went to an army facility in Juiz de Fora and so on. So it's like this, it's curious, right? I wanted to bring up this story because it's something not everyone knows happened. Some people who follow the Varginha case more closely will remember this.